I. Night by the seaside, where the heart awakens. The salty scent of the Miami night clung to Michael Whitmore's skin as he sat alone on the sand, his bare feet feeling the cool touch of the grains. The waves crashed rhythmically, their white foam edges glinting under the moonlight. Far on the horizon, the lights of ships flickered like lost stars appearing and vanishing. At 34, Michael had once dominated boardrooms, building empires, but now, after the collapse of his family's conglomerate, a betrayal by those he trusted, he was little more than a drifter. In his hand was his father's old pocket watch, its silver surface, etched with worn patterns, smoothed by years. Its faint ticking, nearly drowned by the waves, was the thread anchoring him to a past he couldn't reclaim. His dark hair fell messily over his forehead, and his gray eyes, once sharp and calculating, were now clouded with a pain he couldn't name. He hadn't planned to come here. Miami was just a temporary escape, a place to dodge the screaming headlines about his failure. But the beach, with its vast, endless expanse, seemed the only place big enough to hold the weight of his ruin. He wore a crumpled white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the top button undone, as if his former polish could no longer contain the chaos within. The watch read midnight, but time meant nothing to him anymore. What was there to count down when everything he'd built had vanished? A soft rustle of sand broke his thoughts. He looked up, expecting a lost tourist or a late-night jogger, but instead saw a woman standing a few steps away, her silhouette framed against the dim glow of a boardwalk lamp. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with shoulder-length brown hair tousled by the sea breeze. A navy blazer hung loosely over her arm, her white shirt slightly disheveled, as if she'd just escaped a long day. Her light brown eyes sparkled with curiosity, tinged with mischief. She tilted her head, studying him as if he were a puzzle she hadn't decided to solve. "You look like you just lost the world," she said, her voice soft but clear over the waves. She nodded at the watch in his hand. "But at least you've got that. Not a Rolex, but it looks valuable." Michael blinked, caught off guard. He wasn't used to strangers striking up conversations, especially with such casual humor. For a moment he considered ignoring her, retreating to his solitude. But her smile disarmed him, the way it crinkled the corners of her eyes with warmth. He gave a small smile, surprising himself. "It's worth more than you think," he replied, his voice hoarse from disuse. "But it's not for sale." She raised an eyebrow, stepping closer and sitting on the sand a few feet away, uninvited but not intrusive. "Good. People who sell keepsakes usually regret it." She stretched out her legs, her sneakers caked with sand, and leaned back, propping herself on her hands. "So, what's the story? Lost money? Lost dog? Or just lost your sense of humor?" Michael's lips twitched. It had been a long time since anyone spoke to him so freely, without the deference his former status commanded. "Maybe all of the above," he said dryly. He glanced at her, trying to place her. She didn't seem local, not with that sharp wit and faint New York accent. "And you? Lawyer?" He nodded at her blazer, the kind that screamed professionalism but was worn with a carefree air. She burst out laughing, the sound clear and ringing in the night. "Nailed it! Avery Blair, lawyer, defender of the underdog." She gave a mock military salute. "I'm here for a case, but today was too long, and the beach beats a hotel room. What's your name, Mr. Lost the World?" He hesitated. The name Michael Whitmore still carried weight, even now, when it was synonymous with failure. But her eyes held no judgment, just a quiet invitation to be honest. "Michael," he said simply, omitting his surname. "Just Michael." "All right, just Michael," she said, her tone teasing. "You gonna tell me why you're sitting out here brooding like a character in a bad novel, or do I have to guess?" He didn't know why he answered. Maybe it was the anonymity of the night, or the way she seemed to see through his shell without prying. "Let's just say I built something, and it fell apart. Mostly my fault." He turned the watch in his hand, the metal cool against his palm. "Ever feel like you're out of chances?" Avery's smile softened, and for a moment, her gaze drifted to the waves. "Yeah," she said quietly, "more than you'd think." She pulled her knees up, hugging them. "I grew up in foster care, bounced around a lot, You learn early that chances are like bus tickets. Use them wisely because they don't come often. Michael looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the shadow behind her brightness. She wasn't just a witty stranger stumbling into his night. She was someone who'd fought her own battles. "And yet you're here, joking about my watch," he said, his voice gentler. "How do you do it? Keep going, I mean." She shrugged, but her eyes held a spark of defiance. "You find things to hold on to. For me, it was drawing at first. I wanted to be an artist, you know? But then I saw too many kids like me get crushed by the system, so I chose law. Thought I could fight for them." She glanced at him, her mischief returning. "What about you? What keeps you going besides that watch?" He didn't have an answer, not really. The watch was his father's, a man who believed in him before the world taught Michael to doubt himself. But it wasn't enough anymore. "I don't know," he admitted, the words heavy. "Maybe I'm here to figure that out." They slipped into easy conversation after that, trading stories like old friends. Avery shared that she loved black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just pure bitterness. And once stayed up all night memorizing the lyrics to an old jazz song to win a bet. Michael, loosening under her warmth, revealed his secret passion for astronomy, how he'd sneak onto his family's roof as a kid to map constellations. "There's something about the stars," he said, his voice low. "They're always there, even when you can't see them." Avery pointed at the sky, where a star burned unusually bright, like a beacon in the velvet dark. "Like that one?" she asked, her voice half teasing, half dreamy. "If you see it again, think of me. No pressure, but I'm pretty memorable." He laughed, truly laughed, and the feeling was like a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "Deal," he said, meeting her eyes. In that moment, he wanted to ask for her number, to hold on to this fragile thread. But the weight of his failure pressed down, whispering that he had nothing to offer. Who was he, without his title, his empire? Just a man with a broken watch and a shattered life. As dawn approached, the sky turning pale purple, Avery stood, brushing sand from her jeans. "Well, just Michael," she said, her smile tinged with sadness. "This was fun. Don't lose that watch, okay?" He stood too, his heart pounding with a sudden urge. "Avery," he said, his voice catching, "thank you. For tonight. If fate gives me another chance, I won't let you go again." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she nodded, a small, meaningful smile on her lips. "Fate's a funny thing," she said. "Maybe it'll surprise us." As she walked away, her figure fading in the dawn light, Michael saw her pause briefly, glancing at the watch in his hand. Something flickered in her eyes, recognition or an ungraspable memory. Then she was gone, leaving only the sound of the waves and the space she'd filled. He sat back down, the sand now warm under the rising sun. The star they'd seen still lingered, faint but stubborn against the brightening sky. He gripped the watch, its ticking like a silent promise. Avery Blair, lawyer, defender of the weak. He didn't know her number, her address, or even her last name. But he knew her laugh, her courage, and the way she'd made him, for one night, feel less alone. Avery, walking back to her hotel, felt an odd ache in her chest. Michael's watch stirred something. A faint image of her long-lost mother holding a similar watch before the orphanage took her away. She shook her head, pushing the memory down. She was good at keeping people at a safe distance, hiding her fear that no one would stay. But Michael's gray eyes, honest and vulnerable, had slipped past her guard. She looked up at the sky, the star fading in the light, and whispered, "Don't make me regret this fate." Second, 1 year later, the heart recognizes who it seeks. New York, on a radiant October afternoon, shimmered with pale golden sunlight, filtering through glass skyscrapers, reflecting off bustling streets. In a meeting room on the 32nd floor of a Manhattan building, Michael Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his sharp gray eyes scanning the figures on the screen. At 34, he was no longer the lost man on Miami's beach a year ago. AshenCore, the startup he built from the ashes of his family's conglomerate, was now a promising name in tech. But its independence was under threat. The Whitmore Corporation, run by his ambitious uncle, was pulling every string to acquire Ashencore, dragging Michael back into the control he'd sworn to escape. Dressed in a deep blue suit with a loosely knotted tie, his hand instinctively touched the pocket watch inside his jacket. His father's keepsake, the only anchor in his chaotic days. The modern meeting room, with transparent glass walls overlooking New York's skyline, was filled with stern-faced suits. Today's meeting was to discuss a partnership with a charity, a strategic move to boost Ashencore's public image. Michael listened, but his mind wandered. He often thought of that night in Miami, of the girl named Avery whose smile stirred his heart. He'd tried to find her, searching for Avery Lawyer in New York, but the name was too common, and all he had was the memory of her eyes and the bright star in the sky. Each time he opened the pocket watch, he heard her voice. "If you see it again, think of me." The meeting room door swung open, snapping Michael from his thoughts. A woman stepped in, her walk confident but unpretentious. She wore an elegant gray suit, her brown hair neatly tied back, though a few loose strands softened her professional air. Her light brown eyes sparkled, and a silver necklace with a small star pendant peeked from her collar. Michael's heart skipped, his breath catching. It was her, Avery Blair, the woman he thought existed only in memory. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her voice clear and authoritative. "I'm Avery Blair, legal representative for the Hope Foundation, your charity partner." She smiled at the room, unaware of Michael, who stared as if the world had stopped turning. Michael stood abruptly, his chair tilting slightly behind him. All eyes turned to him, but he didn't care. "I used to wonder how many lawyers named Avery there were in New York," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. His stunned gaze locked on her. "Turns out there's only one I could never forget." Avery turned, and for a moment her eyes widened in recognition. Then she laughed, a mix of embarrassment and mischief, giving him a playful glare. "You're the guy drinking on the beach last year? I thought you were a failed artist or something." Her tone was light, but her eyes shimmered, as if she too was holding back a wave of emotion. The room fell silent, Michael's colleagues exchanging curious glances. He smiled, a real smile, the first of the day. "Not an artist," he said, his voice warm, "but I can draw a few constellations if you'd like." The mood in the room lightened, as if Avery's presence had brought a fresh breeze. She sat across from Michael, placing her files on the table, but their eyes kept meeting in fleeting moments. A quick glance, a subtle smile. Michael noticed the star necklace at her throat, its silver glinting under the lights. His hand brushed the pocket watch in his suit, a sense of fate surging within him. She was here, truly here, not a dream or a memory. The meeting began, but Michael struggled to focus. Avery spoke about the Hope Foundation's project, which supported orphans and struggling families. Her voice was sharp when discussing contract terms, yet passionate when mentioning the children the foundation helped. Michael realized she wasn't just the witty woman from the beach. She was a fighter, advocating for those no one else noticed. He admired how she switched between professionalism and sincerity, commanding the room's attention. As Avery spoke, Michael caught a small detail. Her hand trembled slightly when mentioning an orphan boy in a case she was handling. "We're trying to ensure this boy isn't sent to an unsafe facility," she said, her voice briefly lowering. "Every child deserves a chance." Michael met her gaze, and in that moment, he saw a crack in her optimistic facade, a familiar pain, like what he'd glimpsed on Miami's beach. After the meeting, as others left the room, Michael called out to her. "Avery," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Got a minute?" She turned, crossing her arms with a half-teasing, half-genuine smile. "1 minute, just Michael. I've got a pile of paperwork waiting." But she didn't leave, standing there, her eyes expectant. He stepped closer, the distance between them just a few feet. "I looked for you," he admitted, his voice low. "After that night. But all I knew was you were Avery, a lawyer who defends the underdog. New York's too big, and I thought I'd never see you again." Avery raised an eyebrow, but her gaze softened. "Really? I thought you were just some guy who liked brooding by the ocean, not the type to go looking for someone." She paused, then added quietly, "But I remembered that night too." It's not easy to forget someone talking about constellations at 3 in the morning. They stood in the empty meeting room, afternoon sunlight streaming through the glass, bathing them in warm gold. Michael wanted to say more, to ask how she'd been, to tell her how he'd changed. But part of him still feared she'd see he was no longer a man of promise, just someone struggling to hold on to his last shred of freedom. He only said, "You're wearing that star. It reminds me of Miami." Avery touched her necklace, her fingers grazing the star pendant. "I always wear it," she said. "Reminds me hope's out there, even on the worst days." She looked at him, her eyes seeming to hold an unspoken thought, then smiled. "What about you? Still got that watch?" He pulled out the pocket watch, holding it up for her to see. "Never leaves me." Its faint ticking sounded like a shared heartbeat between them. The moment was interrupted when Michael's assistant knocked, reminding him of an important call. Avery stepped back, shrugging. "Duty calls, CEO. Don't let me keep you from your schedule." But before leaving, she added, "Good to see you again, Michael. This time, don't count on fate." He smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in months. "I won't," he promised, watching her walk out, her figure blending into the hallway crowd. Back in his office, Michael couldn't stop thinking about her. Avery Blair wasn't just a memory from a fateful night. She was real, living, fighting, and now part of his world. But he knew the pressure from the Whitmore Corporation was growing, and if he wasn't careful, everything he'd built, including this chance with Avery, could slip away. Meanwhile, Avery returned to her small Brooklyn office, where stacks of case files cluttered her desk. The case of Ethan, the orphaned boy, was keeping her up at night. Every time she looked into his fearful eyes, she saw herself 20 years ago, a child no one wanted. Seeing Michael again unsettled her, but she told herself to focus. She had no time for dreams of a man with gray eyes and an old watch. But as she touched her star necklace, a faint smile curved her lips. "Fate," she whispered, "you sure love to play." Third, growing affection, amid laughter and teasing. Autumn in New York draped the city in a vibrant cloak of gold and crimson, cool breezes carrying the scent of dry leaves, roasted coffee, and city exhaust through bustling streets. In Ashencore's bright office on the 32nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, Michael Whitmore sat before his computer, trying to focus on a financial report. But his thoughts drifted to one person, Avery Blair. Since their unexpected reunion in the boardroom weeks ago, she'd become a light in his stifling days. As pressure from the Whitmore Corporation, run by his ambitious uncle, grew heavier, aiming to swallow Ashencore and drag Michael back into the control he'd sworn to escape. Dressed in a charcoal gray suit with a loosely knotted tie, Michael still appeared the cool-headed CEO everyone knew. But when he thought of Avery, his lips curved unconsciously, and the pocket watch in his suit seemed to tick more gently. Michael found every excuse to be near Avery, though he told himself it was just business. He invited her to lunch to discuss the charity project with the Hope Foundation. But those meetings often veered into meandering conversations, from favorite foods to childhood memories. He prolonged meetings, asking unnecessary questions just to hear her voice a few minutes longer. He even pretended to need legal advice, calling her late at night with absurd queries like, "Avery, do you think this contract has any risks? I mean, legally speaking, in general." Each time her smile was audible over the phone. "Michael, you're calling me at 10 p.m. for this? Next time, just admit you miss me." He laughed, his face warming, but didn't deny it. One afternoon at a small cafe near Ashencore's office, Michael sat across from Avery, trying to act professional as she speared a piece of salad and eyed him mischievously. "You're looking at me like I'm some safe long-term investment," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Careful, I'm not a stock, Mr. Michael." He burst out laughing, the warm sound turning a few heads. "I don't invest recklessly," he replied, feigning seriousness. "But if you were a stock, I'd buy every share and never sell a single one." He winked, a gesture he'd never done before, and the silliness made his heart race. Avery blushed but quickly recovered, pointing at him. "That was cheesy, you know that? But I'll give you points for effort." They laughed loudly, and in that moment, the cafe seemed to hold only them. Avery, with her playful nature, loved catching Michael off guard. During a meeting with Ashencore and Hope Foundation staff, as Michael stood to present, He absent-mindedly adjusted his tie, a habit when stressed. Avery, seated in the front row, whispered just loud enough for the room to hear. "That's the 5th time you've fixed your tie, boss. Need help?" The room erupted in laughter, and Michael, who once intimidated partners, flushed red. He shot her a mock glare, but his eyes sparkled with amusement. "Ms. Blair," he said, pretending sternness, "I'll note this in the meeting minutes." Colleagues exchanged curious glances, and from then on, rumors of Boss Michael and the witty lawyer spread through the office. In retaliation the next day, Michael sent a carefully packed bento box to Avery's Brooklyn office with a note, "Homemade, to thank you for your stellar legal support." When Avery opened it, she instantly recognized sushi from her favorite Japanese restaurant. No way Michael made it. She called him, laughing hysterically. "Michael Whitmore, you fraud? Homemade? This looks like a masterpiece. Admit it, you ordered it." He only chuckled over the phone, his voice low. "I neither confirm nor deny. Just eat it." Avery shook her head, biting into the sushi, admitting to herself she was losing this playful game. But not every moment was lighthearted. Michael grew to admire Avery not just for her optimism or humor, but for how fiercely she lived for others. He knew about her case, about Ethan, an orphaned boy she was fighting to protect from a shoddy care facility. One afternoon, when he stopped by her small office to drop off documents, he found her amid piles of files, her eyes red. "Avery?" he called softly, stepping inside. She startled, quickly wiping her eyes and forcing a smile. "Just dust. This office is too old." But Michael didn't let her deflect. He sat beside her, saying nothing, just waiting. Finally, she sighed, her voice trembling. "Ethan reminds me of myself as a kid. Alone, unwanted. I'm scared if I fail, he'll think he's not worth saving." Her words cut like a knife, and Michael saw the vulnerable Avery behind her strong facade. He took her hand gently but firmly. "You're not alone, Avery. Not then, and not now. Ethan has you, and you have me." He spoke without thinking, but when her eyes met his, surprised and touched, he knew he'd said the right thing. She squeezed his hand lightly, whispering, "Thank you." In that moment, under the sunset filtering through the window, they felt an invisible thread pulling them closer. Healing came not just from words. One weekend, Michael offered to join Avery to visit Ethan at a temporary shelter. He wasn't sure what he expected, maybe just to understand her world better. But watching Avery play with Ethan, teaching him to draw a star on paper, Michael felt a warm wave rise within him. He joined in, awkwardly holding a pencil and sketching a lopsided constellation, making Ethan giggle. "You draw so bad," the boy said, and Avery laughed, her eyes on Michael with tender warmth. "Definitely not CEO material with a pencil," she teased, but her voice was soft. For the first time, Avery felt true companionship, not just words, but actions. In return, Avery helped Michael face his own fears. One evening, as they sat on a bench in Bryant Park, the city lights twinkling around them, he opened up about the Whitmore Corporation's pressure. "They want me back, as their puppet," he said, his voice low. "I used to think if I didn't succeed, I was nothing." Avery took his hand, her gaze steady. "Michael, you don't need to prove anything to them. Ashencore is yours because you built it from nothing. Don't let them take that away." Her words were a spark, reigniting his resolve to hold his ground. Romantic moments laced with humor deepened their bond. Once Michael decided to impress Avery by brewing coffee for her. He showed up at her office with a cup, proudly saying, "Consider this thanks for putting up with me." Avery took a sip and grimaced. "Good Lord, Michael, is this coffee or dishwater?" She laughed loudly but took another sip, just to see him shake his head in embarrassment. "Stick to being a CEO," she said, her eyes twinkling. Another evening, as they strolled along the Hudson River, Avery pointed to the night sky, where a star shone brightly. "Think that's the same star we saw in Miami?" she asked, half teasing. Michael looked at her, his heart pounding. "Maybe," he said, his voice low, "but I don't need a star to remember you." His words made Avery blush, and she turned away, faking a cough to hide her fluster. But when his hand brushed hers, she didn't pull away, letting their fingers lightly intertwine for a brief moment. Then there was the time Michael tried to surprise Avery with a drawing, a star inspired by their Miami night. The result was a scribbled mess, more like a flower than a star. Avery held it, laughing until tears streamed down her face. "Michael, I wanted to be an artist, but you should quit this idea now." She taped the drawing to her desk, declaring, "I'm keeping it to remind me you're a genius in other fields." Michael shook his head, but his eyes were soft, happy to have made her laugh. Though their feelings grew, both kept an invisible distance. Michael feared the Whitmore Corporation's pressure could drag him down, making him unworthy of Avery. He worried that if he failed, she'd see him as the lost man from the beach. Avery, though smitten, feared fully opening her heart, afraid he might leave like others in her life. Ethan's case made her vulnerable, each small courtroom setback stirring her fear that she couldn't save anyone, not even herself. But their moments together slowly eroded those fears. One evening, as Michael walked Avery home after a long workday, they stood outside her Brooklyn building, the streetlight illuminating her star necklace. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I never thought I could laugh this much. Thank you, Avery." She smiled, her eyes bright. "Don't thank me," she teased. "Just keep making those fake homemade bentos and we're good." They laughed, and in that moment, their gazes locked, as if both knew. They were falling into something deeper, though neither dared name it. As Avery entered her building, she touched her necklace, her heart racing. Michael, walking home, felt the pocket watch, a smile lingering on his lips. Under New York's sky, the bright star still twinkled, witnessing their growing love, built from laughter, healed scars, and small, unforgettable moments. Fourth, gentle touches and joy in the small things. Autumn in New York's suburbs brought cool breezes sweeping through lush green fields, where blades of grass swayed like ocean waves. Pale golden sunlight filtered through vibrant red maple leaves, casting dappled patterns on the ground. Michael Whitmore and Avery Blair stood before a small charity center in rural Westchester, a red brick building with large windows and a shaded garden. They were there to inspect the facility, part of the partnership between AshenCore and the Hope Foundation. Michael, in a navy blue dress shirt and simple slacks, looked more relaxed than usual, though his gray eyes held a trace of tension, a remnant of the mounting pressure from the Whitmore Corporation, which was intensifying efforts to seize his company. Avery, in a light gray sweater and jeans, her brown hair loosely tied, seemed to blend into the crisp air, her smile as bright as the sun. Children poured out of the center's main door, their laughter echoing as they raced into the garden. Avery instantly joined them, kneeling to talk to a little girl clutching a tattered doll. She pulled colored pencils from her bag, drawing a large star on a sheet of paper and teaching the kids how to color it to shine like the sky. Michael stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, his gaze soft as he watched her. He didn't just see Avery, the woman who stirred his heart. He saw how she brought light to everyone, from stranger children to him, a man who once thought he'd be forever lost in darkness. In that moment, he realized he didn't just love her, he loved the world she created, where everything seemed healable. "Avery Blair, you're a star yourself," he said, stepping closer, his warm voice laced with teasing. She looked up, mock glaring. "Don't just stand there spouting empty compliments, Mr. Michael. Come draw with the kids, or are you afraid of getting your hands dirty?" A boy giggled, waving a red pencil at Michael, and before he could protest, Avery pulled him down to the grass, shoving a piece of paper into his hands. Michael, more accustomed to numbers and contracts than colored pencils, clumsily drew a lopsided star. "I'm no good at this," he muttered, but Avery laughed, patting his shoulder. "It's fine. You're drawing like this to show the kids a star doesn't need to be perfect to be beautiful." The children nodded, and Michael looked at her, his heart pounding. She always did that, turned mistakes into something precious. These small moments between them multiplied, like gleaming pebbles along the growing river of their affection. After tense AshenCore meetings, Michael secretly left a bento box outside Avery's Brooklyn office door. It was always something she loved, salmon salad or tempura sushi, with a handwritten note, "Eat this, don't let paperwork swallow you." Avery, though she pretended to grumble about the mysterious desk intruder, kept every note in her drawer, sometimes rereading them on lonely late nights. One afternoon, Avery showed up at Ashencore's office with a surprise. She handed Michael a folded piece of paper, shrugging. "So you'll think of me during boring meetings." When he opened it, it was a drawing of a star, yellow and blue pencils interwoven, simple yet vibrant. In the corner, she'd written, "This star won't fall, don't worry." Michael smiled, carefully folding the drawing and tucking it into his wallet, as if it were his most valuable possession. "I'll keep it," he said, his gaze locked on her. "And you too, if you'll let me." Avery blushed, turning away to hide her smile. "You're way too good at cheesy lines," she mumbled, but her heart raced. These small gestures, though simple, were slowly dismantling the walls they'd built to protect their hearts. The most memorable scene unfolded on a rainy day in Manhattan. Michael and Avery had just finished a meeting with the Hope Foundation, but as they stepped outside, the sky unleashed a downpour. They ran to shelter under the awning of a small cafe, its warm neon glow spilling from the windows. Rain poured relentlessly, forming shimmering streams on the sidewalk, its roar drowning out the city's noise. Avery, her hair wet and clinging to her forehead, laughed brightly, her eyes sparkling. "It's unfair how you still look like a perfect CEO in this rain," she teased, pointing at Michael's suit, now slightly crumpled. He shook his head, grinning. "Perfect? You should see yourself in a mirror, Blair." He reached out to wipe a raindrop from her cheek, but paused, suddenly aware of how close they were. Avery, noticing his hesitation, grabbed his hand and pulled him into the rain. "You've never danced in the rain?" she shouted over the deluge. "Your childhood must have been so sad." Michael, stunned, let her lead. The cold rain soaked through his clothes, but he didn't care. Avery spun, arms outstretched, laughing like a child, and Michael, for the first time, let go of control. He took her hand, pulling her into a clumsy dance in the downpour. They bumped into each other, laughing hysterically, and when a passing bus splashed water everywhere, Avery yelped, clinging to Michael to dodge it. In that moment, his arms wrapped around her, his heart pounding like it might burst. He looked down, seeing the streetlight glint off the star necklace at her throat, shining like the star they'd seen in Miami. He tightened his grip on her hand, for the first time unwilling to let go. "Avery," he whispered, his voice hoarse from rain and emotion, "you make me want to live all the things I've missed." She looked up, her breath forming faint clouds in the chilly air. "Then live," she said softly. "Start now." They stood there in the rain, hands clasped, and though the storm raged, both felt an inexplicable warmth. Back at the office, Michael couldn't erase the image of Avery in the rain from his mind. He began to believe he could love and be loved, that he was more than a CEO or a Whitmore. But deep down, he still feared his past, its mistakes and the family's pressure, could destroy everything. Each time he opened the pocket watch, he wondered if he was strong enough to hold on to this happiness. Avery, in her small Brooklyn apartment, sat by the window watching the rain. She touched her star necklace, thinking of Michael, his awkwardness drawing with the kids, his eyes full of longing in the rain. She was starting to accept that she deserved love, that Michael wasn't someone who'd leave like others in her life. But fear lingered. If she fully opened her heart and he vanished, could she endure another heartbreak? In the days that followed, they continued their small gestures. Michael brought black coffee to Avery before a crucial court hearing with a note, "You'll win, Star." In return, Avery stuck a star-shaped sticker on his laptop, making him laugh when he found it. Each act, however small, was a step forward, drawing them closer, though both stood on the edge of a greater confession. One evening, as they walked through a small park near the office, Avery pointed to the sky, where a bright star twinkled. "Think that's our star?" she asked, her voice light as the breeze. Michael looked at her, his gaze tender. "I don't know," he said, "but I know I want to see it every night, as long as you're here." His words silenced her, and she took his hand, their fingers tightly laced. Under the starlight, they felt a certainty. Whatever the future held, they were finding joy in the smallest things, and that was enough. The turning point, when Michael nearly loses her again. New York's night was frigid, November winds slicing through the streets, carrying the icy breath of winter and the smoky scent of late-night hot dog carts. Neon lights from Times Square billboards flickered, casting patchy glows on the rain-slicked sidewalks. On the 32nd floor of Ashencore's building, Michael Whitmore sat alone in his dark office, the faint blue light of his computer screen illuminating his face. At 34, he had built Ashencore from the ruins of his past, a testament to his resilience after his family's conglomerate collapsed. But now Ashencore teetered on the edge of being devoured. The Whitmore Corporation, led by his ambitious uncle, Charles Whitmore, had made an offer he couldn't easily dismiss: acquire Ashencore in exchange for restored reputation, wealth, and the status Michael had lost. The true cost, though, was his freedom. Signing the deal meant returning to his family's control, something he'd sworn never to do again. Michael turned the pocket watch in his hand, its worn silver surface glinting faintly. The tiny ticking echoed like his own heartbeat, but it couldn't calm the storm within. He gazed out the window at New York's glittering skyline, a city that never slept, yet his mind drifted to Avery Blair. She was the light in his darkest days, her witty smile, her sparkling light brown eyes, and the way she made him feel he could be a better man. Every moment with her, from the bento boxes he left her to their dance in the rain, was a precious gem he wanted to hold forever. But he knew signing the deal would drag her into the mire of his past, a world of calculation, betrayal, and endless battles. Refusing it risked Ashencore's collapse, stripping him of his reputation, career, and perhaps his chance to prove he was worthy of her. The choice between status and himself had never felt so heavy. He stood pacing the office, pausing before the star drawing Avery had given him, pinned to the bulletin board. Its yellow and blue pencil strokes, simple yet vibrant, bore her words. "This star won't fall, don't worry." He touched it, fingers grazing the paper, and fear surged. He feared not just losing Ashencore, but losing her, the one person who made him believe he could live true to himself. Did he have the strength to hold on to both? Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Avery sat in her small office, the warm glow of her desk lamp illuminating stacks of files on Ethan's case, the orphan boy she was fighting to protect. She'd uncovered a troubling detail in the Ashencore acquisition contract, a clause allowing the Whitmore Corporation to reallocate charity budgets, threatening funding for the center where Ethan stayed. This wasn't just a work issue. It struck her deepest fear, that Michael, the man she'd opened her heart to, might choose status and abandon her, just as she'd been left in foster care. She touched the star necklace at her throat, seeking hope, but her heart sank. She recalled the night in Miami when Michael looked at her with wounded gray eyes, promising that if fate gave him a chance, he wouldn't let her go. Now she wondered if fate was toying with them. The next morning, Avery marched into Ashencore's office, determined to confront Michael. He stood by the window, his gaze distant, his charcoal gray suit rumpled as if he hadn't slept. When she entered, he turned, a familiar smile flickering briefly before fading under her serious expression. "Michael," she said, her voice steady but trembling slightly, "we need to talk about the acquisition contract." He nodded, gesturing for her to sit, but she refused, standing tall, arms crossed as if shielding herself. "I read the contract," she continued, her tone sharper. "The charity budget clause. It'll cut funding for the center where Ethan is. Those kids need that place, Michael. You know how much this matters to me." She paused, her eyes searching his, filled with anger and hurt. "But more than that, I need to know what you'll choose. Ashencore or your family, freedom or status." Her words cut like a blade, sharp and precise. Michael wanted to explain, to say he hadn't decided, that he was trying to protect her and Ashencore. But he stayed silent, his hand gripping the watch in his pocket. "Avery," he finally said, his voice hoarse, "I don't want to hurt you, but it's not simple. If I refuse, Ashencore could collapse. If I agree—" He trailed off, unable to finish. If he agreed, he'd lose himself, and likely her. Avery shook her head, her eyes glinting with disappointment. "I thought you were different," she said, her voice quiet but piercing. "I thought you'd fight for what's right, not for the Whitmore name. But if you choose them, Michael, you're not just giving up Ashencore, you're giving up me." She turned, walking out, leaving Michael with a chilling void. Her footsteps echoed in the hallway, each one a hammer to his heart. In the days that followed, Michael drowned in inner conflict. He knew refusing the deal was right, but the fear of failing again, of becoming the worthless man from Miami's beach, held him back. He recalled the months after his family's conglomerate fell, sitting alone by the sea, feeling the world had turned its back. He didn't want to return to that version of himself, nor become his family's puppet. He began avoiding Avery, skipping Hope Foundation meetings and ignoring her texts. But each night he opened her star drawing, staring at it like a reminder of who he could be, if he dared. He wondered if he had the courage to choose himself, or if he'd forever be caged by the Whitmore name. Avery, meanwhile, poured her heart into Ethan's case. She worked late, battling the legal system to ensure the boy stayed in a safe home. Each time she saw Ethan's fearful eyes, she saw herself 20 years ago, a child no one wanted, waiting for someone who never came. The case wasn't just work. It was her way of proving she could change someone's fate, as she'd wished someone had for her. But thoughts of Michael brought sharp pain. She remembered his eyes as they danced in the rain, how he held her hand like she was his most precious thing. Now she feared he'd choose the easy path, leaving her behind once more. The climax came on a late night when Michael made a painful decision. He couldn't face Avery or drag her into his fight. He chose to leave New York, abandoning Agincourt to start anew, hoping it would shield her from the rift between him and his family. He wrote a letter, leaving it on her Brooklyn office desk with the pocket watch, his most cherished keepsake, tied to him through his darkest days. The letter read, "Avery, thank you for showing me light. You're the brightest star in my darkest days. But I'm not worthy, not of you, not of Agincourt. Keep this watch and remember I always want you to be happy. Michael." He left the office, stepping into New York's cold streets, the biting wind cutting his skin. He felt empty yet relieved, as if surrendering to fate. He didn't know this decision would lead to a moment that changed everything. The next morning, Avery found the letter and watch on her desk. She clutched them, tears spilling as she read his words. Her heart shattered, not from anger, but because she realized he was running, not just from his family, but from her, from himself. She recalled Miami, when he said if fate gave him a chance, he wouldn't let her go. Now he was letting her go, and it hurt more than any rejection. She rushed from the office, calling him with no answer. Finally, she went to his Manhattan apartment under a starlit sky. Michael opened the door, stunned to see her. Avery, hair disheveled from the wind, stood holding the watch. "Avery," he began, voice hoarse. But she cut him off, her voice trembling with anger and emotion. "Don't," she said, raising the watch. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk away and leave this. Like you can erase everything we've had." She stepped forward, her eyes blazing under the hallway light. "I used to think I was a kid nobody wanted," she said, her voice breaking. "I've lived my whole life scared everyone would leave. But that night in Miami, you made me believe I was worth remembering. If one night made me carry you with me until now, I need you more than I thought. Don't leave, Michael. Not for me, but for you." Her words were a beacon, piercing the darkness in Michael's mind. He looked at her, seeing the star on her necklace glint under the light, and realized he didn't need status to prove his worth. He had her and himself. He stepped forward, pulling her into his arms, holding her tightly as if she might vanish. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice choked. "I'm not going anywhere. I choose you. I choose us." Under the starry sky, they stood hand in hand, the pocket watch between them like a renewed vow. Michael knew he'd face the Whitmore Corporation, but this time, he wasn't afraid. He had Avery, and that was all the strength he needed. Days later, Avery received good news from the court. She won Ethan's case, securing his place in a safe home with a foster family ready to take him in. When she told Michael, he listened, his eyes full of pride. She brought him to meet Ethan, and seeing the boy's radiant smile as he drew a large star on paper for her, Avery felt a piece of her childhood wounds heal. Inspired by her, Michael announced a new plan for Agincourt, pivoting to a company focused on social impact, starting with supporting centers like Ethan's. He told his team, voice resolute, "We're not just building tech, we're building hope." This wasn't just a rejection of the Whitmore Corporation. It was a declaration that he'd lived true to himself, to the values Avery helped him see. Soon after, Michael and Avery returned to the Westchester Charity Center. They sat on the grass watching the children play under the autumn sun. Avery drew a star on paper, handing it to Michael. "This is to remind you," she said softly, "that you don't need to be anyone but my Michael." He smiled, pulling her close, and under the warm sunlight, they knew whatever the future held, they'd face it together. Above them, an early star twinkled, witnessing their promise, not just for one night, but forever. Sixth conclusion, a new night, but forever. Winter draped New York in a thin layer of snow, glistening flakes falling slowly under streetlights, transforming the city into a radiant tableau. In Ashencore's office on the 32nd floor in Manhattan, Michael Whitmore stood before his team, his gray eyes resolute yet warm. At 34, he had endured his darkest days, the collapse of his family's conglomerate, months of aimlessness on Miami's beach, and moments when he nearly lost himself. But today he stood as Michael, not the cold CEO or a man burdened by the Whitmore name. He was the man who rejected the Whitmore Corporation's acquisition, choosing to live true to himself and the values he cherished. That decision wasn't easy. Rejecting the Whitmore Corporation meant facing financial risks and investor skepticism. But Michael, inspired by Avery Blair, the woman who showed him light in darkness, had transformed Ashencore into a symbol of rebirth. The company not only advanced technology, but also launched a fund for orphaned children, partnering with Avery's Hope Foundation. This fund wasn't just a project. It was Michael and Avery's way of healing their own childhoods, offering hope to children like Ethan, the boy Avery saved from a shoddy care facility. Michael looked out the window where snow fell gently on New York's skyline. He touched the pocket watch in his suit, feeling its familiar ticking. Once an anchor through lonely days, it now reminded him of Avery, of the fateful night in Miami, their shared laughter, and the moment she stood under a starry sky, convincing him to stay. She was his brightest star, and he knew no matter what the future held, he'd never let her go again. Meanwhile in Brooklyn, Avery sat in her small office, where stacks of files were now neatly organized. Ethan's case had ended in victory, and the boy was thriving with a loving foster family. This success wasn't just professional, it proved she could change someone's fate, as she'd once wished for herself. She touched the star necklace at her throat, a faint smile forming. She recalled the days she feared opening her heart, terrified Michael would leave like others in her life. But he stayed, not just for her, but for himself. And that made her believe she deserved love, deserved to belong. In the months following the acquisition refusal, Michael and Avery worked tirelessly to build the Orphan Support Fund. They visited centers, met children, and held drawing sessions where kids could paint their dreams bright, as Avery had done with Ethan. Michael, clumsy with colored pencils, always joined in, making Avery laugh hysterically at his lopsided stars. "You're the worst artist CEO," she teased, but her eyes were tender. Michael just smiled, pulling her close, whispering, "But I'm the best at keeping you." Their love grew through small things. Michael continued leaving bento boxes at Avery's office door, now with notes quoting silly star facts he found online. Avery retaliated by plastering star stickers around his office, making Ashencore's team chuckle as their boss shook his head in mock embarrassment. Each gesture, however small, affirmed they were building a future together, not just one night, but forever. The final romantic scene unfolded on a winter evening in a small Greenwich Village restaurant. The cozy space was adorned with flickering candles and warm golden lights glowing against red brick walls. Michael and Avery sat across from each other, she in a simple deep green dress, her brown hair loose, and he in a white shirt and gray suit, both elegant and approachable. Dinner brimmed with laughter as Avery teased him about the time he broke the coffee machine trying to impress her, and Michael countered with the time she dropped sushi on her shirt during a meeting. When dessert arrived, a small chocolate mousse, Michael grew serious. He took a deep breath, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket and placing it on the table. Avery raised an eyebrow, her playful smile flickering. "What's this, another fake bento?" she joked, but her voice trembled as she saw his eyes, deep, sincere, and full of love. Michael opened the box, revealing a simple yet exquisite silver ring engraved on the outside with, "Not just one night." Inside, a tiny star was delicately etched, glinting under the candlelight. He took her hand, his voice warm but emotional. "Avery, you're the brightest star in my darkest days. You showed me who I could be, not for anyone else's expectations, but for myself. This time, I'm keeping you forever, the way you keep light for me." Avery looked at the ring, then at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. She laughed, hiding her emotion with her usual teasing. "This time, I'm saving your number, just in case you forget." But her voice broke, and she nodded, letting him slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it always belonged. She grasped his hand, whispering, "Michael, you're my home, and I'm not letting you go anywhere." They left the restaurant, hand in hand, stepping into New York's snowy night, flakes dusting their shoulders. Their laughter rang out, clear like children's, as if reclaiming the childhoods neither fully had. Above, a bright star twinkled, witnessing their promise. Not just one night, but forever. Michael pulled her close, kissing her forehead, and they stood in the snow, feeling the completeness of the moment. A simple wedding. Months later, Michael and Avery held a small wedding at the Westchester Charity Center, where they'd once drawn stars with the children. It was unpretentious, attended only by close friends, Ashencore's team, and the center's kids. Avery wore a simple white dress, her star necklace gleaming, while Michael was in a deep blue suit, the pocket watch pinned to his vest. Ethan, the boy Avery saved, proudly carried a flower basket, beaming. As they exchanged vows, Avery looked at Michael, saying, "You're the star I found in the night, and I'll keep you forever." Moved, Michael replied, "And you're the light that led me home." The children tossed star-shaped paper confetti into the air, and laughter filled the springtime air. Great success. After the wedding, Michael and Avery's orphan support fund flourished, becoming a model replicated nationwide. Ashencore, under Michael's leadership, thrived financially and earned acclaim for its social impact, proving a company could grow while driving change. Avery continued her legal career, opening a larger Brooklyn office dedicated to protecting children and the vulnerable. She and Michael frequently returned to the Westchester Center, hosting drawing and storytelling sessions, bringing joy to the kids. Each child's smile reflected their own journey, children who lost their childhoods, now reclaiming it through love and hope. On quiet nights, Michael and Avery sat on their Manhattan apartment balcony, gazing at the sky. They pointed out stars, laughing about the Miami night when it all began. Michael always carried the pocket watch, and Avery always wore the star necklace. These were no longer symbols of pain, but of a journey, from one fateful night to a lifetime forever. 40 years later, on a summer evening, Michael and Avery Whitmore sat in worn wooden armchairs on the porch of their Westchester home, where green fields still stretched endlessly. At 74 and 70, Michael's hair was silver, but his gray eyes still sparkled when he looked at Avery. Her brown hair, now streaked with gray, framed the star necklace, its silver faded but gleaming under the moonlight. On the small table between them sat the old pocket watch, its faint ticking steady, like the heartbeat of their enduring love. The night sky unfurled, stars glittering like gems on black velvet. Michael held Avery's hand, their fingers laced, the ring engraved with "Not just one night" still shining on her finger. "See our star?" he asked, his voice warm, pointing to a brilliant star in the southern sky. Avery smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You always think you found it," she teased, but her eyes were tender, brimming with memories. They had lived a full life. Their orphan support fund was now a global network, providing homes for thousands of children. Ashencore, led by Michael and later their children, became a beacon of social innovation. Avery, though retired, still visited charity centers, teaching kids to draw stars, as she had with Ethan, now a renowned artist. Their 3 children and 5 grandchildren often gathered at this house, filling it with laughter and news stories. "We did it, didn't we?" Michael said, his voice reflective. "Not just one night, but a lifetime." Avery squeezed his hand, smiling softly. "More than that, Michael. We gave each other the whole sky." They sat under the stars, knowing that though time passed, their love shone eternal, like the first star they saw in Miami, guiding them